So, last year Rainbow High released a Dia de los Muertos collector's doll. This is her. Her name is Maria Garcia. And this doll was controversial to say the least. A lot of people had issues with some of her design choices, and look, I know this is old news. Like, the Day of the Dead was all the way back in November, but I still want to talk about this doll. And personally, I wasn't feeling great back in November when it came to my physical health, so we're working on her now. Okay? Just let me work on her. Consider her my practice run for my Monster High redesign video. So, why is Maria Garcia such a controversial doll? A lot of people claim that she doesn't look Mexican at all, and that her dress looks more like a flamenco dress, which is from Spain and not Mexico, and that aside from her face paint and sombrero and her bag, she doesn't really look Mexican, she doesn't really hold any elements of Dia de los Muertos. Now, as a Mexican myself, what do I think about all of this? I personally think there is a lot of Mexican inspiration on this doll, or at least an earnest attempt for the doll to look Mexican inspired, but that the ideas weren't strong enough to read as Mexican, or just didn't translate well into the doll. Let me explain. I am gonna start with her most controversial aspect, her flamenco dress. And I say flamenco in quotation marks because the dress is missing a lot of elements to be considered a flamenco dress. And I personally don't think that was their intent. This is just a dress with a mermaid cut skirt, which, fun fact, were also fairly popular in Mexico. We call them Maria Victoria style dresses due to a popular actress and singer that wore them a lot. But unfortunately, due to the black and red color scheme, yes, the dress can be misinterpreted as a flamenco dress. Red is a color that is really prominent in Mexico, but it's not really that associated with the Day of the Dead. Those colors are more orange and purple, but I also understand not wanting your character to look like a copycat of Esquelita Calaveras, especially when Monster High is your competition. Now, when it comes to the rest of the doll, I think I know what they were going for. When I look at the crown, the silhouette of the doll, and, well, all of the roses, I think they were going for a Virgin of Guadalupe inspiration. For those who don't know, the Virgin or Lady of Guadalupe, it's a prominent figure of Mexican Catholicism. She's basically Mother Mary but Mexican. There is a lot to her and her history, but we're not gonna talk about that today. I'm not a religious history teacher or something like that. She's actually a really popular figure here in Mexico, and even people who aren't religious or didn't grow up in a Catholic household, they know who she is because she's basically everywhere. And it's even common to see her in Dia de los Muertos altars, especially if the person who passed used to pray to her or worship her. And look, this is all speculation. I don't work for MGA. I don't know what their ideas for the doll were. This is just a theory that I had based on the shape and everything of the doll. I personally want to believe they started with that idea. But also, let's face it, a dress inspired by a Catholic figure probably would not translate well with universal audiences, and also probably wouldn't have been so popular either with the Mexican Catholic people. Like, I am not Catholic, but I grew up in a Catholic household, and something like this would have been deemed disrespectful by a lot of people, especially elder Catholics who are the ones who have the money to pay for the dolls for their children. But the problem with that is, when you take out the religious elements and replace them with more generic ones, and use a more unconventional color palette, the only things that help reminiscent of the Day of the Dead, or even Mexico for that matter, is the Catrina makeup. When I showed all of my Mexican friends the doll, we all agreed that she looked pretty, but uninspired. We didn't deem her as offensive or disrespectful, just plain. Which is terrible for a doll that is meant to be a collector's doll. She doesn't look like an art school student who tried to come up with something to celebrate her heritage or her favorite holiday. She looks like a girl who had a day or two to put together a Katrina outfit because their history teacher told them that all students that dress like Katrinas and Katrinas on that day will get extra credit, and she just borrowed one of her mom's old dresses. I'm sorry if that comes off as mean, I'm not a mean person, it's just, that's such a specific vibe that if you grew up in Mexico and went to school here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I am gonna say though, the accessories, they are all beautiful. I love the idea of the gold skeleton hands. I think they should have just replaced the bodysuit with just bone-shaped jewelry. I love the Calavera handbag and the sombrero, the boots. Oh my god, they are so pretty. And I want the entire doll to look the way the sombrero looks, which is actually what inspired me to redesign her. I decided to give myself some rules, and these were not really necessary, they just were there for me to challenge myself more. But basically, I decided to force myself to keep the mermaid cut skirt and keep the same color scheme as the original doll, just because I want to prove that with the right inspiration, this can really look Mexican. Originally, I didn't know what I wanted to do with the doll. My first option and the easiest route would have been a folkloric dress, and I did actually draft some concept ideas for that, but at the end it will break the rule of keeping the shape of the skirt, and also it felt that it would have been the easy way out. And don't get me wrong, I feel like Latin America overall has some of the prettiest traditional clothing, if not the prettiest, but I wanted to challenge myself a bit more. So I decided to draw inspiration from one of the doll's accessories, her sombrero. Maria comes with a beautiful embroidered sombrero with so many details that I immediately fell in love with it, and I wanted to run with that idea. So, the main inspiration for this design is a charro suit. It's probably known by a lot of you as a mariachi suit, which is technically also correct considering this is an outfit commonly worn by mariachis, but we Mexicans refer to it as a charro suit. There's something about these types of outfits that I love, especially when women wear them. I don't know, it makes them look so good. And the good thing about this outfit is that it gives me more freedom with the shape of the skirt than a traditional dress would. Now, for her makeup, I decided to give her a full Katrina makeup instead of the rear mask-like division made for the doll. My guess is that they wanted her to match with the custom ball dolls that they released at the same time. But if you're going to do a Katrina makeup, why not fully commit to it? And also, the doll doesn't mention the mask ball at all in any place in her box, so I'm not counting her as part of that line. As for her hair, I went with braids. Braids are just really common in traditional Mexican hairstyles, and one of my favorite things about holidays like the Independence Day or Revolution Day or even Dia de los Muertos is just seeing a lot of people wearing braids with ribbons tied into them. I don't know, I feel like it's such a core memory of mine when my mom would put ribbons into my braids for Independence Day, and I wanted to incorporate that into the doll. As for her accessories, I left them pretty much the same, especially her shoes and her sombrero, except for some minor changes on her earrings and her flowers. A big complaint about the doll was that she had a rose motif instead of a marigold motif, when marigolds are the flowers that are commonly associated with Dia de los Muertos. But I also want to let you guys know that roses are a really common accessory in Katrina makeup. Because when it comes to Katrinas, aside from the sugar skull looking makeup, there's not a specific set of rules, okay? La Katrina is not a part of a religious tradition or a spiritual figure for that matter, and for some reason, non-Mexicans and non-Latinos tend to think she is. There's obviously an association with La Muerte, aka the Dead, aka the Grim Reaper, which is a feminine figure in Mexican culture. After all, the poems that the Katrina came from were joke poems about the hypothetical deaths of famous people at the time and how La Muerte came to collect their souls. And I don't intend to explain to all of you how Mexican humor works, it's just a part of the Day of the Dead. But La Katrina herself was actually a political cartoon, made to poke fun at the Mexicans who were trying to dress and act as rich Europeans, ignoring the fact that they were Mexican. And with the time, she kept evolving and evolving until she became what it is today, a symbol that represents death while celebrating Mexican culture. And I know you guys are not here for an in-depth lesson of Mexican history or the history and creation of La Katrina, but it's hard not to talk about the doll that is meant to represent the Day of the Dead without talking about the history of the symbols that appear during this holiday. And it's a huge pet peeve of mine when non-Mexicans misinterpret them and they think figures like Katrina are exclusively tied to the Catholic Church or exclusively tied to something else when it's clearly not. It's just something for people to have fun with. But okay, flowers. I do want to include marigolds, or as we call them in Mexico, cempasúchil. But I decided to add those to her dress instead of her hair flowers. But for her hair, I did decide to add the roses. Again, they are really common here. But I also added another flower that is commonly associated with the Day of the Dead. And I feel that this flower would flow more nicely with the color scheme. And that is the purple cempasúchil. And technically it's not cempasúchil, it's a velvet flower. But it's also a really common flower to see in altars. So I went with that for her flower crown. By the way, for her braids and lace details, I add them on Clip Studio Paint, but Clip Studio didn't record the process of that, so yeah, that's why they just appear. I wanted to mention that. Now, let's discuss my favorite part, colors. Maria has 4 colors into her color scheme. The 2 main colors are red and black, and the secondary colors are gold and purple. And I actually really like this color scheme. I think it has a lot of potential. But I want to add a personal change. I want to make red and gold the main colors and purple and black the secondary ones. Mostly because that way it allows me to incorporate marigolds into the doll's design, And I personally think it makes her look more cheerful, which I think it matches the spirit of Dia de los Muertos more, because while the Day of the Dead is a holiday that is meant to make us remember those who are no longer with us, that sentiment is meant to be on a happier note per se. It all ties with the way death is seen by most Mexicans. We joke about death. We see this day as an opportunity to talk about those who are no longer with us and remember the good times we had with them. The whole idea is that someone that is dead comes to life when we share the memories we have of them. Cemeteries that are dark and green places suddenly look full of joy and energy with all the flowers and candles. That's why I feel the doll needed to look brighter and happier. And, well, this is how the doll turned out. I am honestly really proud with the result. It makes me want to try to make a custom doll, but I suck both at sewing and doll customization. But yeah, I think she looks really pretty if I do say so myself. I'm just happy that I got this chance to work on adult redesign and talk about my culture to you, because if I'm being honest, the chances to do that are really limited to me. Also, this is the first time in months that I've done a full render drawing, and I'm really excited about it. If you checked my last video on my mental health, I am finally starting to feel like myself again, and I think this is now showing in my artwork. But anyways, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, don't forget to like it and subscribe. I also want to know in the comments if you have any thoughts on the Maria Garcia doll. I know she's a bit of a controversial one, but I'm really curious to hear what people think of her. I am personally a huge fan of Rainbow High, and if it was up to me, I would have loved if they have gone a different route with this doll. And I don't know if they will try again, but if they do, I hope they make a better job. Anyways, I feel like I already talk a lot, so I'm just gonna cut it off here. If you want to see more of my art, I'll leave my social media in the description so you can check that out. I am Princess Rosa, and I'll see you the next time. Bye!